Great to be back here and seeing lots of familiar faces. I was just going to run through quickly principles of nutrition, a little bit about seasonal outlook, and then markets and options, a little where to from here, I guess. Beef cattle nutrition I look at with 3 young boys is not a lot different to kind of family nutrition. You got to provide energy in your potatoes there, in your sweet potato, protein, roughage, vitamins and minerals. If you have a good balanced diet, it's all there. But when we're drought feeding, or if you're a vegetarian, you might have to take some iron tablets. Or if you love your meat, you're going to start taking Metamucil fibre tablets, right? And it's a bit like drought feeding. A lot of people have been feeding drought rations for a long time. And so we have seen some issues there, and we'll cover those. Energy is generally the most limiting factor when you're drought feeding, and it can be supplied in a number of ways. Sugars and starch, for example, in ryegrass. The ryegrass has a lot of water-soluble carbohydrates in it. Starch is in grain. It's in roughage as complex carbohydrates. It gets broken down in the rumen into more simple sugars. And it can be supplied as fats and oils, for example in cottonseed or as in distiller's dried grain. Protein can be limiting on old pasture or when you're feeding young stock. You can provide protein if you're providing as a supplement. It can be provided as a rumen protein, or what I would call the brug protein, as your rear. So you're just supplying nitrogen there to the rumen bugs, and they are living off the nitrogen that you're supplying and the carbon from the roughage and using that to live and breed, and the animal just digests those bacteria. And that's where a lot of the animal grazing animals actually get their nutrition, is just digesting rumen bacteria, things that die, things that overflow. You can provide protein as bypass protein, meaning it doesn't get digested in the rumen, and these are generally in the form of meals. Bypass protein is useful for cows. It's also very good for poor stock, very drought affected stock that you're trying to turn around. Sometimes grain can take a while to work, and bypass protein and the meal is really useful for turning around poor stock. Roughage is not essential in maintenance rations for stock, but it is essential for lactating cows, and it is essential for growing stock. So anything above maintenance needs roughage in the rumen. If you were to supply crushed wheat or barley at one end of a feeder and just the roughest bit of sorghum, stubble or whatever, the animals are going to eat 20% roughage and about 80% concentrate. So you need that 20% of roughage in their diet. In this case, it's grape mark there. So I've had quite a few calls about feeding smoke taint affected grapes. And I have talked to some of the vineyards in the Hunter, so this does seem to be a pretty widespread problem. So as terms of residues, there doesn't seem to be the residue risk associated with grape mark as there might have been in other years. Because it's been so dry, low humidity, there's been very few fungicides applied to the grapes this year. So it seems a safer option, but if you're talking to the provider of the grape mark, or in this case just the grape prunings, then just ask what they've applied, and if they can't really tell you, then it would be best to go to cows and calves, something that's not going to go into the supply chain in the immediate future or the foreseeable future. It's likely that those grape prunings would be better than just roughage, because they're either going to have the sugars that are in the grapes, or if you dump them in a pile in your paddock, there's probably going to be some fermentation and we might get some alcohol there, and that's also a source of energy, and that's okay too. But we don't know exactly how much. My overall feeling is that you should still consider it just a roughage source, because we don't really know how much extra energy is in there, and a lot of it will be pretty high moisture content. The seed does have oil in it, but when it's just been fed out like this, hasn't been ensiled, the animal doesn't get the benefit of the oil in the seed, it just passes straight through. So we've had a major problem in our Trangie research station, which had been fed corn silage for a long time, and corn silage is very low in vitamin A. So we had calf mortality, low calf weights, and we are seeing vitamin A deficiencies, some calcium deficiencies in long-term feeding programs. I expect most of these things will turn around when animals have access to normal, a normal diet. Overall, cows need access to a large quantity diet of low to moderate quality, and that's why the coast has been good at having lots of cows and not growing out many stock. Calves, on the other hand, don't eat much food, but it needs high quality. So I guess I would ask you to keep that in mind. What are you going to have most likely in the next 6 months in terms of what you might carry through? Seasonal outlook. Well, as everyone knows, it's been a lot of stormy weather. It has been hit and miss. It's pretty remarkable to see the change from Armidale to here. Armidale looks fantastic. Yarrell looks so-so, and this side of Walker still looks absolutely terrible. And mostly, I would say, it looks very ordinary from Walker all the way through to Dungog, really. And even around here, it's very patchy. This is the bomb forecast for the next week or so. So, a couple of things there. So you're around about here, so you're going to be on the edge. So you can expect at this stage to get a couple of inches. And that forecast has been pretty solid across a number of sites for a while now, so it looks pretty solid. But also the rain across a wide area means that I would expect cattle prices will keep edging up and are going to stay solid for at least the month of February. So it is going to give you some breathing space to make a decision. So that's another website that I follow. So that's that's Vacy. That's the forecast, the 16-day forecast for Vacy. So again, it's saying chance for a couple of inches next week. Murray's giving the thumbs up down the back. I should say this one is notorious for chopping and changing, but it has been pretty solid. Has been pretty solid for about almost a week. So I would say, yep, we don't know when or how much, but there'll be something next week. The 3-month forecast is not as brilliant. So the chance of exceeding median rainfall February to April is not that great. I suppose the good thing is that this is the time of year when we would expect most of our rainfall, so we could be below median or below average and still get quite good rainfall. And that has been the case sort of on the mid-north and north coast. We haven't quite reached average rainfall, we've still had pretty good rain. So I've put some of this information into a program to produce a seasonal outlook. So this is based on from 1960 up until 2019. So from January 28, a couple of days ago, through till October 1. So there we go, 1st of February through till October 1st. And based on what has happened in the last 50 years, it's come up with some percentiles of how much grass we might expect to grow. That being the 10th percentile, so the worst combination of years, and sort of the median average scenario, what kind of pasture we might grow over the next sort of 7 months, and best case scenario. This is kilograms of dry matter per hectare on the left. So I've put a dotted line there at a tonne of grass per hectare. That's around about the bottom of your elastic on your blundstone at decent sort of coverage, half to 2/3 ground cover. A tonne of grass per hectare can keep a 450 cow going, is around about maintenance, okay? So if you're way down here and you basically have no pasture now, so some people in the room might be there and some people might already be here, some people might be up here. So it depends where you're starting from, depends on your stock rate. But I've seen a few places around at this point, and if we all look at our median scenario, we're not going to have maintenance feed for cows for a few months yet, okay? A tonne and a half, 1.5 tonnes of dry matter per hectare is around about ankle bone, bit below of decent coverage, and that is when your cows are going to really start putting on weight again. So again, it depends on your stocking rate, it depends on the starting condition of your cows, like have you early weaned in past years or they've been doing it tough. Can they get by on maintenance, or do they really need to be putting on weight ready for next calving season? So I haven't lived in the Hunter for 6 or 7 years, and I've never lived in the lower Hunter, so I suppose that is just, I've put that up there as a conversation starter for the Grassfed beef group to kind of talk about at their next meeting. You borrow this graph and see where you think you are. See what are the chances of you growing decent feed prior to winter. And the reason that that is so important, and I'll get there, is because of our feed supply situation. So what can we do? So the things we're going to talk about is weaning, feed, sell a gist, which stock classes, and when is the line in the sand, as I see it. You know, there's no prescription, this is as I see it. And if Blackie were here, he might contradict me, and that's okay too. This is a lot of what I see. Cows and calves grazing on very poor pasture. Cows are losing weight, calves are going nowhere. That is a no-win situation. And I did a couple of these meetings in October. Now October, devising a plan in October is very different to the end of January in terms of what's possible in front of you. So that time's up for these guys. They have to be weaned. Why? Weaning allows you to dry cows to be run on rough country, or even country where there's very short feed or a lot of ordinary quality feed. If you have paddocks with roughage, and there I didn't see a lot of them, but they can be run on that country, supplemented with urea and or a small amount of concentrate, and get by no problem. I'm always astounded at how cows can get by on the smell of an oily rag through summer in the Hunter. Dry licks are the most efficient way of supplying urea to those cows. They'll self-regulate on it and they'll go off it when there's green pick available. If your cows are skinny now and you wean the calves off them, what to do? Well, we're going to talk about that a little more. Make sure you wean early next time. And by that I mean, so on our home farm we have early weaned for 3 years in a row. And our cattle have, because of that, have been in good shape, and we've been able to gradually sell down fat cows all the way through. And they've always been worth $1,000. And we've kept small calves, we've bought in drought affected calves, because we haven't had a lot of feed, but we've had good quality short feed. I would say, I don't have it there, but preg testing I would say should be on the to-do list. I'm not always a huge advocate for preg testing, and I know Jim will be and a lot of vets are, but a lot of times producers don't do anything different with their preg tested cows, so what was the point? They just sell the dry ones in 6 months. I think there are some pretty clear choices for dry versus pregnant cows at the moment. So if you're making a decision on selling, anything that's preg tested in calf is commanding a clear premium on the market at the moment. Conversely, if your cows were pretty poor, I think it would be a realistic option for some people to join in June for a March calving next year. I know that's probably pretty drastic, but you know, drastic times. I think some people are facing that situation. would take away the pressure of potentially, if a tough spring eventuates. Takes away the pressure of having to provide feed, which I see as, again, a major stumbling block. So right now, if you are feeding, making the decision to feed, you really need an accurate appraisal of that cow right now. So a cow that might weigh 440 kilos in the paddock, and there's lots of them out there, once she gets to the yard, she's going to be 400 kilos. She'll be worth about $2.50 a kilo live weight right now, and by the time you take off all the freight and the commission, everything like that, you're going to be left with about $920 for that cow. Versus if you're feeding hay, it's costing $3.50 to $4 a day. It's cheaper to provide grain for them, but realistically, very few people are set up for grain feeding in this area, and not many people do it well. We have a lot of trucks go past our place at Armidale, and in November, so I always talk to them, and in November I talked to a truckie and said, how's the hay supply look down there? And he goes, he felt that the money would run out before the hay went out. Big places there, they all had 10,000 bales. But the tune has definitely changed a little bit. So we're just consuming massive quantities with the fires, and it's still going into Queensland at a rate of knots. And so, I don't think we'll ever run out, but I think it's going to become prohibitive. The rain, we only had so much hay this time because of failed crop. Northern New South Wales has been getting odds and sods of rain in the Golden Triangle. So if they happen to get a decent crop, they're not going to cut for hay. Their first choice will always be to go through to grain. That looks like it may come to fruition for them this year. So without a failed crop, realistically, I don't think we can't look at hay supplies until October. Not for any realistic value in terms of like a realistic being able to do it viably, feeding hay. Agistment, so this just out my back paddy. So Armidale through to nearly the borders mostly had about 200 mils in January. So I talked to 2 agents this morning, and they say yes, no question that there will be agistment available if that's what you wanted to do. You have to go a fair way for it. There would be nothing south of Uralla. So, decent taxi fare. You may not have the cattle, but maybe you could join with some neighbours to get a double deck or even a B double. No one's going to take massive numbers, but a lot of people could take a double deck of cattle up there at the moment. And it would be rubbish feed. When I say that, it's going to be a lot of summer weeds. So you can see portulaca there, African lovegrass, Chilean needlegrass, but the stock are going to do fantastic. There's going to be a lot of native pastures, so red grass, the native windmill grasses, these types of things. But it's all very fresh, and it's perfect for eating right now. So that would definitely be an option. You're only going to get it for realistically up until around May, because that's when the season will cut out in that part of the world. And if there was any crop, then you're probably not going to get access to it. If you're thinking about selling, this is the kind of prices we're seeing at the moment. So just looked at, I followed a couple of Auctions Plus sales last week. So these are 29 cows and calves from Dungog last week, made $3.38 a kilo. So $1,500 for what looks like, they were mixed sex calves, but look like they were probably August, September calves from last year. So not gangbusters, but yeah, it's very, it's very solid money. These were 30-odd PTIC heifers, 2.5 years old, not very heavy, 340 kilos. That's from Glenny's Creek, and they also made close to $1,300. So there's no doubt the black cattle, either with calves or PTIC, are a very valuable item at this stage. Weaning-calves. So it's not like we're in February almost, so it's not really early weaning anymore, but it might be a bit earlier than what you're used to. For people that might have weaned in October or November or December, that would have been early weaning. Those calves would have gone onto a quite high protein pellet, 16 or 18%, something like that. So they don't need that anymore. So the calves that have been weaned now that might be kind of 150 kilos, it might be a bit less, can get by on a fattener meal of around 14% protein if they've got access to a bit of pick, which will have quite high protein in it this time of year. If you are early weaning and you're still confinement feeding those calves because you don't have, you can't let them out just yet, then cereal hay is still the best roughage for the calves, or a grassy lucerne. So not stubble, not rice straw, but not fantastic, pure lucerne hay either, which can give them tummy upset. Ryegrass silage is another thing that might become available for the mid-north coast, which would be pretty good for those calves. These calves can get by on sort of 1 to 2% of their body weight, which is not a lot of feed. How much to feed these calves, or what's the weight gain target for these weaners? It depends on your plan for them. So if they look not too bad right now, the calves that is, then I will be happy if they gain about 0.3 kilos per day, those calves. If you're planning to keep them for the long term, that they might be future breeders, they might go to the feeder heifer market eventually at 2 years old, and they can go there 0 or 2 teeth, that's fine. Or it might be the MSA job at 400 kilos live weight. Basically, we're playing the long game with those heifers or those steers, whatever, if we're only getting them by on 0.3 kilos a day. It's not a lot, but it'll keep them going if they look okay now. Avoid stagnation or weight loss. And of course, if they're pretty woody right now, then 0.3 kilos is not going to be enough. You need to do a bit more with them. Some people may not be able to weigh your calves. What do you do in that situation? And I would say, well, you just have to look at them. Check out the body language and observe them. Coat shine, do they look shiny in the coat? Are they licking themselves? So grooming, they've got a bit of energy for grooming, this kind of thing. Make sure that they're eating properly, just check them out. Early weaning it's gaining more acceptance. Doing a good job on weaning calves should be a source of pride. It's fantastic thing to do, and I believe it has a much wider application than we're already seeing. So if you're still planning to, if the weaners had a rough start, so they're a bit woody or they're a bit light, or you're planning to sell them as weaners in April, May, or you have specific joining dates for later this year because you really want to punch them along, try and carve them as 2 years old to get your system going again, then obviously you have to keep them going a bit better now, and you should be targeting 0.6 to 0.7 kilos a day. 0.7 is about the maximum you need to do. I had some targets for direct sale of stock to processors, and I've got some numbers up there, but realistically right now you are going to get better money going to the yards, and that is always the way on a rising market. On a declining market or a drought market, the processor money will be better than the yards, but it has turned around right now. The meatworks are still trying to catch up get ahead of their kill, so they're still killing cattle that were booked in before Christmas. I see that running for another 2 to 3 weeks, and once they get through that backlog, we will see prices increases, no question. They're already edged up. I noticed that Wingham doesn't even have a grid out for next week, so it's just a day by day who gets rain and how much. So it's really, it's on a bit of a knife edge for sure. As far as you might have space booked in. I talked to Steve Moy about this recently. He's livestock buyer with Wingham, and they would say if you have space booked but you haven't received the price grid for that time, they're not going to quibble if you pull out. as soon as you get the grid. But if you have space booked and you get the grid for that time and you say, yep, okay, like you don't tell him that that's no good, then they would expect you to deliver your cattle. I understand that Throsby's has a contract system in place, and so I don't think any of the process is going to take anyone to court, you know, if you didn't honour the deal and pulled your cattle out, but they're probably just not going to buy them again in future, direct consignment. Yeah, of course they'll take them through the yards, but they also might get desperate enough to do that anyway. So there's market premiums for pregnant or PTISD stock at the moment for bigger lots, but previous big discounts for heifers and light stock of these. So, you know, it's only a month ago, no one wanted light stock at all. Everyone was paying for weight because it was more expensive to put weight on. But we're seeing that turn around a little bit. And so just to illustrate this, so these were some, this was a bit more on Auctions Plus. So these were Angus heifers, 10 months, 270 kilos. So these were Western cattle, look, not too bad. So they made $360 a kilo. That's the heifers, and the steers made $345, and they both made around about the same. So there was massive discounts for heifers. We're seeing that even up, especially on, you know, potential breeding stock, which is, you know, big lines of Angus heifers. Wouldn't expect the same thing for crossbred heifers. You know, we're still seeing a bit more of a discount. So this is just what I had a look at the Singleton sale for the 29th. So what's that? Couple of days ago. So there's the steer portion there, bit all over the place, but averaging around $3.40, and the heifers averaging around $3 a kilo. So that's what you could expect at the sale yards, but it's edging up all the time. And of course, if the rain comes to fruition next week, I would expect the trend to keep going, and for, as I said, prices to stay solid for at least the month of February, if you were playing for time on trying to avoid selling stock. And just, yeah, had a look at the cow price, and as I said, averaging around $2.50 a kilo. So the early weaning, I'm just going to go through it quickly because we're not really there anymore, but, you know, by the textbook. So this is, I put all the items that are important, and I put a ticker across based on what we've done over the last sort of 3 years, and we've been really happy with it. So we haven't separated the cows for the calves on size because we just didn't have enough. So they're all in together, didn't matter. But if you do that, you just got to make sure you have trough space, ample trough space, so that everything can get a feed at the same time. If you don't have ample trough space, you've got uneven sizes, then you've got gorging and you've got some that are missing out. That's not on. Pink eye can be a real issue, and especially with drought affected weaners that you might buy in. I wouldn't see it as being as big of an issue now because we don't have the dust, but still got plenty of flies. We don't vaccinate, but we do easy dose, give an antibiotic if necessary. Into the eyebrow is the most reliable. 5 cc's into the eyebrow is the most reliable, and nutrition is the most important thing. 5M1, we didn't castrate, dehorn, never got them on feed prior, just in you go into the yards and away we go. We do have an excellent webinar on that on our website. Going to talk a little bit about compensatory growth. I'm just about done, Cole, if you're getting nervous. This was old CRC trial. Basically, what it shows is that calves that are born light never catch up. They might be born light because of nutrition, or they might be born light because you used a low birth weight bull, or they might be born light because of disease. It doesn't matter what forced them to be lighter, but they'll be lighter all the way through. Calves that are born okay, regular weight, had a tough time pre-weaning, you can expect compensatory growth. They may never fully catch up, but that's fine. just, you know, their genetics is intact. It just means you've got a smaller cow, so next time you feed them, you don't have to feed as much. So this is, we've seen a lot of this actually in our bought-in drought affected heifers. Get fat pretty quickly, give you heaps of options to get out of them in terms of selling to the fat market or breeding them. So we don't mind that. Of course, if you're selling feeder steers, you know, they're going to be a bit lighter. And things that might grow less in the grow out phase, so they're okay up to weaning, grow less in the, you know, after weaning or in the yearling stage. They tend to catch right up in the feedlot, so of course the feedlots love these guys. Given HGP a bit of compensatory growth, they're all over them. Slightly less marbling, but yeah, always make the grade. And I mentioned that no use trying to do anything over 0.7, and that's because they'll just slow down. They'll just slow down after that, so they'll grow slower. It's the same as if you grow a ryegrass paddock or even a sorghum paddock over summer and you put stuff on there, young stuff, and you don't sell them at the end of that, you keep them, then they'll grow slower after that. So the research is really clear. Yeah. So based on my view of the world up in the glorious New England, you have to wean. The time is now, right now, okay? I think that if you're forced into a corner and you have to sell, it's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, it's a pretty good time. The prices have gone up $1 a kilo in the sale yard, so if you had to do that, yep, it could be a lot worse. Adjustment option is there. Apart from feeding for the next few weeks or absolute maximum month, while because you get rain and you're waiting for it to come away, that's okay. But apart from that, I see feeding as out of the question. If it was me, well, we've done it. So what we have done is sold down our cows, sold down steers, and kept heifers, crossbred heifers, because they've had no friends in the sale yard, but for us, because we always send to the meatworks anyway, colour's no big deal. So that's what we've done. And if you haven't received much rain up to now, and you don't get much next week, then the week after that, you're going to be in the second week of February and you have to put the line in the sand. If you've had some rain and you get a bit more, you've got more time up your sleeve, but you're just looking to the next June, sand June as it were.